Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be, and welcome to a post on creating history. Suppose that you have collected a bunch of ideas from modern discourse, and you know that they will be buried in an avalanche of noise that is the present-day academic system. Or suppose there is an academic whose name you wish to bury in a memory hole a la 1984, but you don't want that person's ideas to be lost. In either case, you want to save these ideas for posterity. Where can you hide them so that they don't get lost? Why not create or add to a figure from history and elevate that figure to the status of great genius? That would make the job of future researchers much easier. All they would have to do is look up the great genius's name and find concise summaries of their impossibly prolific body of work. To a certain extent, this happens naturally over time, but what if it was done systematically in an accelerated fashion? Consider Herbert Spencer. He was a contemporary of the mummified philosopher Jeremy Bentham, who died in 1832. And Herbert Spencer made, perhaps, a modest contribution to the social Darwinist philosophical discussions of his day. But if a modern group took his work, reinterpreted it, and conflated it with ideas from our present-day perspective, he may someday be remembered in history as someone who was far more prolific and brilliant than he was in real life, publishing 600,000 treatises every year of his academic career. Personally, I'm struggling to finish one such treatise. I mean, writing fiction is one thing. You can do that really quickly because it doesn't have to relate to anything true. But if you want to do something academic, that's work. Next, consider Albert Einstein. After his wife left him, his papers were so badly written and full of errors that they were frequently rejected by the respected journals of his day. Yet today he has been built up to such a towering stature that I can only imagine that the purpose of this elevation is so that fools will waste their time studying him, and so that his effigy can be more easily tipped over when everyone is ready for a paradigm shift. Of course, this may be more difficult than anticipated, since in some circles, Einstein is thought of as almost a deity, which is really messed up, like a saint or a prophet, which, if you really look at the facts rather than the hype, he was anything but. Next, consider Montaigne. He wrote 107 chapters on a wide range of topics over the course of 20 years in the 1580s. If there is anything that unifies these chapters, it is the use of long sentences that require a certain amount of intelligence to digest. Might he be used to select and educate a certain type of workforce? Spies, for example. Such groups may be tied together through the required consumption of books that academics don't usually read. His Wikipedia page, Montaigne's Wikipedia page, claims that he is responsible for inspiring the work of a long list of famous scholars. But if his body of work was constructed as a synthetic historical document, might he have been influenced by the long list of scholars rather than the other way around? I found it very strange that he is credited with influencing Shakespeare, since Shakespeare didn't even start writing his plays until after Montaigne wrote his essays. I also found it strange that Montaigne wrote about cannibalism in Brazil, when scholarly writings about Brazil were not published in France until about 1580, and Montaigne wrote his essays in 1570 by using his castle library. So he wasn't sitting in the middle of a city and, abreast of the latest news. And his essays were not published until 1580, around the same time that these writings about Brazil and cannibalism were arriving in Europe. So this makes this Montaigne character a very strange historical character. And I'd really like to see a document in which Francis Bacon cites him, because, yeah, that's one area to look at. And Bacon is also a strange historical character because he has some very strange works attributed to him as well. Let me see if I can click on this one, if I remember what it was. The New Atlantis. It's a weird story, you wonder. Next, consider Egyptology. There are so many reasons to be skeptical of wood, paint, bodies, and plaster that are supposedly 5,000 years old. I made a video about this a long time ago, and there's a blog post that you can find linked below. Another person I wonder about is Rabelais, or even ancients like the playwright Aristophanes, if they've been co-opted in such a way. What if some of Shakespeare's plays are modern inventions? What if translations of ancient yet obscure foreign poetry are used to send coded messages to special select groups of people? Because the texts are so opaque, they become easy to use for other purposes. So what if all of the world's secrets, or at least some of them, from solutions to philosophical puzzles about free will, consciousness, and quantum cryptography, if they're just hiding in plain sight, and if you are given the decryption keys, you are forbidden from communicating freely, like the rest of us who are under the illusion that we are free to say whatever nonsense pops into our myopic, blinkered little heads. I started thinking about the idea that all of the puzzles that they put in front of us, that they're already solved, because once you start to see the solutions, you think, gosh, everybody must have seen these, or at least a certain subset of people, they saw the solutions. Are they used as a sort of filtering mechanism to take out the people who can see the solutions? So it's kind of like when you are so busy and distracted by your academic pursuits or the news and your work and your kids and everything, you can't see what's out there hiding in plain sight. And if you do see these weird things, everybody else who is distracted, they'll just look at you and say, you must be crazy, But I think it's quite possible to do that because most people don't have the brain power, the time, the interest in looking for things like this, but yet they're everywhere. Just where you look at it and you say, that's not right, or there's teaching students that this is a puzzle when if you just think about it for a little while, it's not a puzzle at all, things in physics, things in philosophy. Of course, okay, let's see. So I found a book recently called The Future of Antiquity. And you think about that for a second, that's a weird title, that you have somebody who sits around and thinks about what the future of antiquity should be. Like, what should we teach children about antiquity? And it was written by, it was as part of a collection of books by a group of wealthy British people who were writing about their visions of how art, men, politics, and antiquity should look in the future. If you want to shape the future such that every single child in every school in the world learns a specific lesson, the most effective way to teach that lesson would be to embed it in a piece of fiction that they are all required to read. Fiction naturally contains morality tales that we want children to learn, but giving those morality tales the weight of history gives them a power that might rival that of religious texts like the Bible. This secularization of the power of history seems to be a relatively modern development, and with the internet, this power can be wielded on a scale that has never before been seen. It's kind of frightening, really. Of course, I am speculating wildly here because I'm a novelist, and that is what novelists do. When I write a book, I create a new world from scratch with its own secrets, and I think that I'll probably use these concepts in the novel that I'm writing. The trick with fiction writing is to allow yourself to think absolutely crazy thoughts like, what if this last short story by Mark Twain called The Mysterious Stranger about Germans, it wasn't written by Mark Twain at all. It was written by somebody else, like an Austrian who died, and they didn't want his work to disappear, so they just renamed it or gave it Mark Twain as the author, knowing that people would read it because Mark Twain is famous. What if they did that with a book by Nabokov? They could do that with anybody. And even with modern authors, Stephen King has authored so many books, and so many popular authors have authored so many books that you wonder, what's going on there? So the trick, as I said, with writing fiction is to allow yourself to think crazy thoughts like that one, while maintaining a strong enough sense of how everyone else views the world that the craziness remains quarantined. That way, you don't get locked up for being bonkers and saying everything's a conspiracy or history can't be trusted entirely. I mean, everybody knows you can't trust everything in history, but what I'm suggesting here is a little bit, it's kind of crazy, the idea that there could be a deliberate effort to hide texts in historical texts. If there's any truth to this fictional exploration, it should serve as a message that if a bored housewife with access to the internet can see these sorts of secrets hiding in plain sight, their encryption system isn't nearly as clever as they thought it was. Or, yeah, it's just... And I'm sure that if somebody who saw these sorts of things and who didn't feel very well grounded and sane and certain that they were not crazy, if they saw these sorts of things, it would be very disturbing. But I think we're all going to have to get used to weird concepts because the internet has just opened up a door to absolute madness. You're basically, whenever you go online, you are delving into, it's like this collective subconscious, the collective id. It is, yeah, it's a whole new world. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope it gave you something to think about, something different. And I encourage you to keep watching the next videos.